everyone, welcome to my channel Upma Biology classes. In this video, our topic is evidences of organic evolution. This video is taken from Evolution series, chapter 7, part 3 of CBSE class 12th. In previous videos of evolution series, we already discussed about the evidence of evolution, but only 5 evidences. In this video, we will discuss next 4 evidences of evolution. So let's begin the topic. In evidences of organic evolution, there are 4 left evidences, which are: first one is the paleontological evidences, then biogeographical evidences, then physiological or biochemical evidences, and the last is current evolution. Now, the first is paleontological evidences. What is paleontology? Paleontology is the study of past life based on the fossil record. The fossils are the remains or impressions of the ancient organisms preserved by natural means in some medium. The media in which the fossils occur include sedimentary rocks, umber, asphalt, volcanic ash, ice, peat bogs, sand and mud. Paleontology furnishes the most direct and most reliable evidence for evolution, as it deals with the actual organism that lived in the past. Here you can see that a fossil of fish, perfectly preserved in the umber, dating from the Middle Tertiary period. So, before considering the ways in which paleontology supports evolution, it is necessary to know that how the rocks and fossils are formed, problems in fossil formation and geological time scale. So, here in paleontology, the important things which is important to know are: the first one, that is the formation of rocks. So there are 3 kinds of rocks regarding their mode of formation, in which the first one is igneous rock. What is igneous rock? The rocks which were formed by the solidification of the originally hot earth are called igneous rock. Such rocks are also formed at present by cooling of magma, which expelled from the active volcanoes. Next is sedimentary rocks. The igneous rocks are gradually broken by the action of rain, wind, heat and cold into small particles that form soil. By rain, the particles of the soil are carried into streams and rivers and ultimately into the deep large lakes and the oceans, where they settle at the bottom layer after layer. In the course of time, the layers so deposited change into rock due to the pressure of the water above and also due to chemical reaction. The new rocks formed in this manner at the ocean or lake floor are known as the stratified or sedimentary rocks. The nature of the sedimentary material determines the kind of the sedimentary rock formed by it. The common kinds are shale, sandstone and limestone. And the last, third, is metamorphic rocks. So what are metamorphic? The deep layers of a sedimentary rocks may melt due to a great pressure and heat and later solidify again to form a new rock. The latter is called the metamorphic rock. The fossils present in the original rock are usually destroyed in the process. The sedimentary rocks named limestone, when melts and resolidifies, forms a metamorphic rock called marble. So these are the main type of rocks regarding their mode of formation. After this, now the formation of fossils. During the formation of sedimentary rocks, the dead animals of the sea or large lakes and of the land carried to the sea or large lakes by rivers sink down and get buried in the rocks. This cuts off oxygen, a condition that prevents decay. The animals thus preserved in the rocks have formed the fossils. Thus hard remains of the dead animals got preserved layer by layer in the sedimentary rocks. The deeper layers had earlier fossil and the upper layers had more recent fossil. Geological uphills had raised many of the stratified rocks above the surface of the sea, thus bringing their preserved life of fossils within the human reach. Land animals have been found preserved in umber, asphalt, ice, volcanic ash, peat bogs, storm dust, and even in sand dunes. So, how is a fossil formed? So, in the formation of fossil, the first process is sediment, then layers formation. After this movement, and the last is erosion. So, this is the way of fossil formation. After this, now, how many kinds of fossil? So, there are seven main kinds of fossils, in which the first one is entire organism or unaltered organism. Next is skeletal material, then molds and cast, then petrified remains, then impressions, then imprints, and the last is coprolites. So here we will see everyone in detail. So first one, that is entire organism or unaltered organism. So here the mode of formation of this fossil is frozen in ice. And examples are woolly mammoths found in the Siberia. Next is here you can see that is skeletal materials. And the mode of formation is trapped in sedimentary rocks. And here like bones, teeth, shells, chitinous exoskeleton, etc. In case of entire organism or unaltered organism, insect exoskeleton, mummies of mammals and birds also found in California. Next is molds and cast, and the mode of formation is hard part trapped in sediments that hardens to rock. The skeleton dissolves, leaving its impressions as a mold. This may be infilled with fine materials which harden to form a cast. And the examples are gastropods from Portland. Next is petrified remains, that is tissues replaced by water carried mineral deposit. And the examples here are petrified forest of Arizona. Next is impressions, and the mode of formation is remains in fine grained sediments on which organism died. Examples are Archaeopteryx feathers, leaf impressions, etc. Next is imprints, footprints, trails, tracks, and tunnels of organisms made in mud, rapidly baked and covered by sediments, is imprint. And the examples are dinosaur footprints. Next is coprolites, and the mode of formation is fecal pellets buried in sediment. And the examples are Cenozoic mammals. So these are the kind of fossils, their mode of formation and the examples. Now, the problems in fossil formation. So, man's knowledge of fossil is mere. In fact, it can never be perfect due to certain problems in the formation of fossils. So, these are cited below here. The first one, that is dead animals eaten up by other animals or destroyed by bacteria and fungi. Only some escape destruction. Next is the marine forms have a greater chance of being preserved in the rocks. Many animals have died on the land, never reaching the ocean for fossilization. Next is only the hard part of the animal can be preserved in the rocks. The soft parts decay and disappear. Thus, the animals without hard parts have left no fossil record. The fossils, being situated at the seafloor, are not accessible for study. Next is the fossils in the deeper rocks may be destroyed by the pressure of the overlying strata and by excessive heat. Next is the rocks which have been exposed by the geological upheavals are eroded by water and wind, destroying the fossils. Next is all the exposed sedimentary rocks cannot be explored for fossil. It is merely by chance that the fossil become exposed or are dug out and receive the attention of the paleontologist. And the last is the study of fossil is very difficult and highly technical. So in spite of these difficulties, man has succeeded in recovering many fossil animals and interpreting their structures. Now, after this, the determination of age of rocks and fossil. So, the age of rocks and fossil can be determined by the following methods. First one is relative dating method, then absolute dating method. In absolute dating, there are many other techniques like the uranium lead technique, carbon dating technique, and the potassium argon technique. So, the first one is relative dating technique. In 19th century, mechanism of accurate dating of rocks and fossils was not available. So, relative dating of the rocks was carried out by estimating the position and the rate of erosion in particular environment. Older rocks, being deeper, had ancient fossil and superficial rocks had more recent fossil. Now, absolute dating method. This method was discovered in the beginning of 20th century. This method is based on the property of a spontaneous decay of unstable radioactive nuclei into stable radioactive nuclei at a constant and known rate. So in this absolute dating, first one is uranium lead technique. This method was introduced by Boltwood in 1907. Radioactive uranium occurs in mineral zircon. Uranium 238, which is radioactive uranium, decays spontaneously to lead, that is Pb 206. So it has a half-life of 4.5 billion years. This means half of total uranium disintegrates into lead in 4500000000. It means 45, then here 80 years. By working out the ratio of uranium to lead in a rock or a fossil, the age of the rock or fossil can be found out. Next is carbon dating technique. This method was given by W.F. Libby in 1950. Radioactive carbon C14 occurs naturally. Its half-life is about 5600 years. C14 decays to form nitrogen 14, and this technique can measure rocks or fossil up to 25,000 years old. It is therefore used in dating recent events. Here you can see the C14 carbon dating process. At first, the Moa bone excavated, then bone cleaned, then a small sample taken and ground into smaller pieces, then further treatment here, that is weak acid added, then freeze dried, then series of chemical reactions to convert all carbon atoms present into benzene, then formation of benzene, then addition of scintillators to benzene sample, then liquid scintillation, a spectrometer counts the number of decays occurring per minute, then computer analysis of data, and last is the date of sample determined. So this is the carbon C14 dating. And the last is potassium argon technique. Radioactive potassium is commonly found in all kinds of rocks. Its half-life is 1.3 into 10 to the power 9 years. It disintegrates to form argon. This method has been recently used to determine the age of hominid fossils in East Africa. So this is all about the determination of age of rocks and fossils. Now, the geological time scale. So it has been estimated that the age of our earth is near about 4.5 to 5 billion years, possibly even more. Life first appeared in water about 4,000 million years ago. The duration of the earth history has been divided into 5 principal geological time spans called eras. So there are 5 eras, that is Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, Proterozoic and Archaeozoic. Of these, the 3 more recent eras are further divided into smaller spans known as the periods, which are in turn split up into epochs. The geological time scale indicating the sequence and duration of the eras and the period with their dominant forms of life is shown in the table. Here you can see that is eon, which is further divided into the eras, era divided into period, period divided into epoch. So in epoch, that is first one, that is Holocene. In this case, there are some animal groups like the modern man dominant and the modern mammals, birds, fishes, insects, etc. In case of Pleistocene, extinction of the great mammals and the primitive man common. Here you can see that is Pliocene. In case of Pliocene, emergence of man, that means formation and adaptive radiation of the modern mammals. In case of Miocene, mammals at peak, first man-like apes formed. So after this, the Oligocene, that is extinction of the archaic mammals, that is the rise of first monkeys and apes. And then Eocene. Eocene means here the diversification of placental mammals, and the Paleocene, that means rise of first primates. So you can see here from the Paleocene to Holocene, that means in Paleocene rise of first primate, then the diversification of placental mammals, then the extinction of the archaic mammals and rise of first monkey and ape, then the mammals at peak, then the emergence of man, then the extinction of great mammals, and the last, that means in Holocene, modern man dominant. So this is all about the Cenozoic, that means quaternary and tertiary stages. After that, in case of here Mesozoic, here you can see the three stages, that is the Cretaceous, Jurassic and Triassic. In case of Triassic, rise of first dinosaurs and egg-laying mammals, extinctions of primitive amphibians, adaptive radiations of reptiles. While in case of Jurassic, rise of toothed birds and Trian mammals, reptiles dominant, dinosaurs become large. And the last, that is Cretaceous. Here the extinction of giant reptiles and toothed birds, rise of modern fishes and birds and of placental mammals. So this is all about the Mesozoic. After this, here the Paleozoic. In this case, there are many stages, that is Permian, Carboniferous, Devonian, Silurian, Ordovician and Cambrian. So this is Paleozoic. So at first Earth formed 4.6 billion years ago. After that, the first is here, that is Archaeozoic. The origin of life, here the no recognizable fossils and origin of solar system. After that, in evolution process, here you can read from below to upward. So the next is Proterozoic. Here the primitive metazoans, primitive eukaryotes, scanty fossils and the prokaryotes develop. Then you can go upward. Then the next is Paleozoic, then Mesozoic, and after the last is the Cenozoic. And in the Cenozoic, the last epoch is Holocene, in which the animals, that means modern man dominant. So in case of Paleozoic, you can see in upper direction, the first one, that is the Cambrium. So all invertebrates, that means phyla established and trilobites dominant. Then in Ordovician, origin of vertebrates start where the jawless fishes form, invertebrates abundant. Then in Silurian, origin of jawed fishes and the wingless insects, earliest coral reefs form. Then in Devonian, the origin of amphibians, fishes abundant and the spiders appear. Then in Carboniferous, the origin of reptiles and winged insects, adaptive radiation of amphibians. And in the Permian, the extinction of many marine invertebrates such as trilobites, rise of modern insects and beetles appear. After that, the Mesozoic, which we discussed earlier, and then the last is Cenozoic. So this is all about the geological time scale. So here you can see that after the formation of the earth and last the formation of the humans. In between this there are many processes, which is billion years process, where the formation of Koro, moon formation, then organism, that means primitive organism formation, then metazoans, amphibians, reptile, birds, and the last, that is the mammals formation. So this is all about the geological time scale. Now the fossil parks. Fossil forests are known as the fossil parks, and many fossil parks have been found in India, in which about 50 million years old fossil forest in Mandala in Madhya Pradesh. Then about 100 million years old fossil forest in Rajmahal Hills in Bihar. Then about 200 million years old coal forming fossil forest in Orissa, and the National Fossil Park Tiruvakkari in the Tamil Nadu. So these are the main fossil park in India. So Birbal Sahni Institute of Paleontology, which is in Lucknow, has considerably contributed to the discovery and study of fossil parks. This institute has been named in honor of its founder, the famous botanist and paleontologist, that is Professor Birbal Sahni. Now, how? Here the number and nature of fossils in early rocks. The rocks of early era, that is Proterozoic, contains scanty fossils than the rocks of later eras, and only simple marine invertebrates are represented in these fossils. This is so because the life appeared in the sea as simple forms and was not as plentiful in the beginning as it became later. Next is distribution of fossils in the successive strata. The distribution of fossils in the rocks of different ages fully agrees with the concept of evolution. A geological succession is noted, that is, in passing from the earliest to the recent rocks, the fossils not only became more numerous but also progressed from simple to more complex types. And after that, the disparity between the past and the present forms of the life. There is a lot of differences between the extinct animals and their living allies. Like as an example, here you can see a family tree of dinosaurs and their living modern day counterpart organisms such as crocodiles and birds. Like example, the extinct reptiles, that is dinosaurs, were very large, fearsome creatures as compared with the existing representatives. The early man was different from the modern man. He lived in the caves like animals and had no social life. So, he obtained food by hunting wild animals and by gathering fruits and seeds of wild plants. By several changes in form, structures, and habits, he has developed into the modern civilized man, having reached social life, domesticating animals, and cultivating crops for food. It thus followed that life has been changing ever since it appeared, and this is what evolution postulates. Now, after this, you can see the missing links, that is transitional forms. So, what is missing links? The fossil organisms which show characters of the two different groups of animals are called the missing links. There are some examples in which the first main example is Archaeopteryx. This is an excellent example of a link in the fossil bird that lives in the Jurassic period about 180 million years ago, and it shows characters of reptile and birds. So in avian characters, Archaeopteryx was decidedly a bird and it possessed feathers which are exclusively avian structures. Also like birds, it has a rounded cranium with fused bones, jaws modified into a beak, four limbs modified into wings, three fingers, four toes, first directed backward, two to four forward and U-shaped furcula. Next is reptilian characters of Archaeopteryx. Like the reptiles, Archaeopteryx had teeth in the jaws, claws or free fingers, a long tail with a free caudal vertebrae and bearing tail feathers on the sides and nail-less stratum. So, Archaeopteryx represents a stage midway between the reptiles and birds and is often called the lizard bird. It suggests the path of evolution of the birds from the reptiles. Huxley aptly described birds as the glorified reptiles. Next is Ichthyostega. It was a primitive fossil amphibian which is regarded as a missing link between the fishes and amphibians. Its fossil date back to late Devonian and Carboniferous period. After this, another example of the missing link is Cymoria, a fossil reptile belonging to the Carboniferous period which links the amphibians and reptiles. It has certain characters such as short limb that extended sideways from the body and provided awkward locomotion and certain skeletal features which were near to amphibians. On the other hand, it possessed certain reptilian character also such as modification of first two vertebrae into atlas and axis, two sacral vertebrae and interclavicle in the shoulder girdle. It also perhaps used to lay cleidoic eggs on the land. Next is Lycanops. It was a mammal-like fossil reptile. Its fossils were discovered from the late Permian period in South Africa. It is considered as a missing link between the reptiles and mammals. Next is Cynognathus. It was wolf-sized mammal like reptiles having characters of both reptiles and mammals. It lived during the early Triassic period. And the last is here Basilosaurus. This fossil well had limb fin, that is hind limbs. It links the aquatic mammals to their terrestrial ancestor. And the last is pteridosperms. These were fossil plants and these are considered as missing links between the ferns and seed plants. Pteridosperms have fern-like foliage and seeds and these plants evolved in Paleozoic era and remained up to Mesozoic era. So these are all about the missing links, that is transitional forms. After this, now the ancestries of the individual animals. Though there are several difficulties in the formation and studies of fossil, almost completely evolutionary histories of certain animals such as horse, camel, elephant and man have been traced from the fossils by the paleontologist. So, the origin of mammals from reptiles can be traced in great detail from the fossil record. Here you can see a reptile family tree. Now, here you can see the ancestries, that means evolution of horse, and evolution of horse was described by Marsh in 1879. It occurred in the North America and it is briefly described here. First one, that is the Eohippus. Eohippus converted into the Mesohippus, then formed Merychippus, then Pleohippus, and the last one, that is Equus, which is the modern horse. So this is the evolution of horse. From top row shows changes in the form and size of the bodies here. So first one, that is the Eohippus. Eohippus evolution of horse is treated with the Eohippus, the drawn horse, about 6 crore years back in the Eocene. This horse was about the size of a fox terrier, only 28 centimeters high at the shoulders, and it had short head and neck. It has 4 functional toes and a splint of the first on each forefoot and 3 functional toes and splints of the first and fifth on each hindfoot. Its molars were short-crowned and adopted for the grinding. Next is Mesohippus. About 2 crore years later, in the Oligocene, Eohippus changed into the Mesohippus, the intermediate horse. Mesohippus had become goat-sized, about 60 centimeters high at the shoulders and had 3 toes on each foot, the middle being longer. The hindfoot had a splint of the fifth toe also. Its molars were still short-crowned. Next is Merychippus. After another 1.5 crore years in the Miocene, Mesohippus changed into Merychippus, the ruminating horse. This horse had grown to the size of an ash, about 100 centimeters high at the shoulders. It had a longer neck. It still had 3 toes on each foot, but it could run on 1 toe only. The side toes had become much shorter and did not touch the ground. The molars had become long crowned and suited for the chewing and grazing grasses. Next is Pleohippus. After 1.5 crore years, more in the Pliocene, that is Merychippus, was replaced by the Pleohippus, that is Pliocene horse. The latter resembles the modern horse except in size. It was about 108 centimeters high at the shoulders and had a single functional toe and splints of second and fourth per foot. The molars were long crowned. And the last, which is the modern horse, is the Equus. Pleohippus gave rise to Equus about 5 lakhs years ago in the Pleistocene. It has only 1 toe on each foot. The 2 side toes are reduced to splint bones. It is about 150 centimeters high at the shoulders and has a long head and a long neck. Its molars have very long crown. It is living at present also. It has spread all over the world. So, a steady change in a given adaptation direction. Here you can see that in the evolutionary lineage is known as evolutionary trend. Evolution of the horse evolved of the following evolutionary trends, that is increase in the body size, elongation of neck and head, lengthening of the limbs and feet, reduction of the lateral digits, enlargement of third digit, strengthening and straightening of the back, better development of brain and sense organs, and increase in the size and structural complexity of the teeth for feed on grasses. After this, now the evolution of major groups of plants. So, if we talk about the evolution of major groups of plants, the patterns of evolution of major groups of plants are conspicuously different from those of vertebrates. Paleontological records reveal that the major groups of vascular plants have left relatively smaller number of fossils, and these fossils show gaps with no transitional forms. There are relatively few major lineages which are very distinct from one another, and the major lineage did not depict gradual and continuous changes over time. Instead, these appeared suddenly and persisted with little fundamental changes for the hundreds of millions of years. The major subdivisions of primitive vascular plants flourished today were probably established about 345 million years ago. So here you can see that the plant kingdom, from the early embryo that develops within the female parent, then the lignin hardened vascular tissue then sits, and after that the plant formation, that is bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperm, angiosperms. Here a group of green algae, that means here you can see all the plant kingdom. So this could be established from one another by the position of spore producing structures called sporangia on the plant. For instance, in most primitive group, that is Psilopsida, the sporangia are terminal in position. In modern vascular group, that is Lycopsida, sporangia are positioned at the base of the leaves. In another group, that is Sphagnopsida, the sporangia lie in holes at the top of plant. So, the seed producing land plant lineages were recognized as early as 345 million years ago. Pteridosperms were the most primitive land plants to develop seed habits. So, these probably are the ancestors of all more advanced vascular plants, that is gymnosperm and angiosperm. The angiosperms evolved about 140 million years ago. Fossil records are not available to point their ancestry. However, paleontological evidences show that nearly all the living orders of the angiosperms with their typical characters have evolved by them. So this is all about the evolution of major groups of plant, which is non-vascular land plant, then the seedless vascular plants, then gymnosperm, then angiosperms. So in all the four major groups of plants, the ancestor is green algae. So this is all about the evolution of major plant group. After this, the next second is biogeographical evidences. So what are the biogeographical evidences? The study of the distribution of animals and plants in the world is called biogeography. Now, what is Pangea? Pangea is held that near the end of Paleozoic era, all the present-day continents form a single large irregular landmass which is called Pangea. This land mass later is split up and the smaller land masses gradually floated over it to their present positions. As the continents drifted away, the seas separated them, forming barriers to free intercontinental movements of the organisms. Because of the different environmental conditions existing of the wide apart continents, organisms evolved independently in them. So this is Pangea. Pangea means here, it means all earth. So this is the starting of the biogeographical evidences. After this, now the biogeographical realms. What is this? The earth has been divided into 6 biogeographical realms on the basis of distribution of animals and plants. which is Australian, Neotropical, Ethiopian, Oriental, Palearctic and Neoarctic. So these were first proposed by P.L. Sclater in 1857 for the birds and were later in 1876 recognized by A.R. Wallace for all animals and plants. The biogeographical realms have no relation to the political boundaries and have developed and fluctuated during geological times. They are separated from one another by major barriers of the sea, deserts, or mountains. Now, what are the evidences for evolution? There are certain facts about the present day geographical distribution of the animals and plants that can be explained only on the basis of evolution. More important of these facts are discontinuous distribution, restricted distribution, and life on the oceanic island. So, here the first one, which is discontinuous distribution in biogeographical realms. So, what is discontinuous distribution? Descendants of a common ancestor in some cases inhabit different continents and also differ from each other. This is called discontinuous distribution. Here are two specific instances for such a distributions in which, like the lungfishes, in the early stages of continental drift like South America, Africa, Antarctica and Australia were interconnected. Lungfishes may have originated in interconnected areas. Later, the continents got separated. Antarctica shifted to a faraway place. Lungfishes are now found one species each in the South America, South Africa, and South Australia. So, in South America, Lepidosirene. In South Africa, Protopterus. And in South Australia, Neoceratodus. So, this shows the discontinuous distribution. Here the camels, these are found in Asia while their nearest allies occur in the South America also. And in case of Mongolias, tulips and sassafras, these flowering plants now grow naturally in eastern United States and eastern China only. The reasons is the same for as like in case of alligators at present occur only in the southeastern United States and eastern China. The explanation of this discontinuous geographical distribution is the North America continent was connected with the Eastern Asia in early Cenozoic by a land bridge in the Bering Strait region. The climate of the whole region was much warmer than at present, and the alligators, as revealed by the fossil evidence, were distributed over the entire region. In late Cenozoic, the climatic changes due to the ice age caused extinction of the alligators in most of the regions. And the southeastern United States and the eastern China remained unaffected by glaciations, and here the alligators survived. As the alligators of the two regions have been separated for a long time, they have developed different random mutations. Therefore, they are slightly different but closely related species of the same genus. Now, after this, the restricted distribution. What is restricted distribution? The parts separated from the rest of the world since long have unique fauna and flora is restricted distribution. Australia have egg-laying pouched mammals that occur nowhere else. This restricted distribution is explained by evolutionists in the following ways. Australia separated from the mainland of Asia during the Mesozoic era before placental mammals evolved. Placental mammals, being more adapted, eliminated the monotremes and most of the marsupials in other parts of the world. The primitive mammals of Australia survived as placental mammals, could not reach there due to the lack of land route. They rather flourished and evolved along different lines into the fossorial, arboreal, semi-aquatic, aquatic and the terrestrial forms. This modification is divergent evolution or adaptive radiation. So this is restricted distribution. After this, the next is life of oceanic island. The animals and plants of the oceanic islands in general resemble those of the nearest mainland, yet include distinct species. For example, Charles Darwin during his historic voyage aboard the ship that is HMS Beagle found in 1835 that the animal of the Galapagos Island resemble those of South American mainland about 960 km away. It appears that animals from the continent migrated or were carried by the oceanic current aboard floating vegetation and logs to the islands in the remote past. As the environmental conditions on the island were favorable for life, the animals flourished and became modified for adapting to conditions there. Thus, long isolation made them animals somewhat different from the ancestral forms, and this means evolution. Here, fascinating groups of closely related passerine birds known to the biological world as Darwin finches. What is Darwin finches? Which is designated by David Lack in 1947. Found on Galapagos Island, differ primarily in body size, feather color, and the bill shape as adaptation to type of food available. So this is the life of oceanic Iceland. Now, here the divergent evolution. What is divergent evolution? The evolutionary process which produces new species diverged from a single ancestral form and adapted to new invaded habitats and to mode of life necessary there is known as adaptive radiations or divergent evolution. In this case, examples like adaptive radiations are divergent evolution shown by the Australian marsupial mammals. A number of marsupials, each different from the other, evolved from an ancestral stock, but all within the Australian island continent. They flourished and evolved along different lines into fossorial, arboreal, semi-aquatic, aquatic, and terrestrial forms. Another example of divergent evolution is shown by Darwin finches. In Galapagos Island, these finches, to avoid competition, diverged along different lines from a common ancestral stock. They adapted to new invaded habitats and to modes of life necessary in such habitats by showing variations in bill shape, feather color, etc. And the last is another example which is revealing adaptive radiation is based on locomotion in case of mammals. A variety of mammals such as cheetah, mole, elephant, squirrel, sloth, seal, bat, flying squirrel, kangaroo and deer have limbs for locomotion. Limbs in all these mammals have common origin but have been modified differently in different mammals and also serves as different functions. So these are all about the divergent evolution. Next is here, that is convergent evolution. And you know that divergent evolution is based on the homology and the convergent evolution is based on analogy. So in case of convergent evolution, here the development of similar adaptive functional structures in unrelated groups of organisms. Like here you can see the example in case of wings of insects, bird and bat. Insect is an invertebrate while birds and bat are both vertebrates belonging to class Aves and class Mammalia respectively. Wings in these three distinctly related animals forms are used for the flying in the air, but these are very different in basic structures and origin. Each has evolved from the separate ancestral population differently but as means of more ancient mode of locomotion. Here you can see the spiny anteater and the scaly anteater belong to the different orders of the class Mammalia. They have acquired similar adaptations for food. And the last is various aquatic vertebrates like fishes, whales, so convergent evolution. Here the dolphins are the mammals, ichthyosaurs are the reptiles and the sharks are the fish. And they all are in water and they used to swim. So this is convergent evolution. After this, the next is parallel evolution. What is parallel evolution? Parallel evolution refers to independent development of similar characters in two animal groups of the common ancestry living in similar habitats of the different continents. Here, this is seen by many placental and marsupial mammals. Wolf, cat, anteater, flying squirrel, groundhog, and the house mouse among the placental mammals are parallel in the evolution by marsupials, namely Tasmanian wolf, native cat, anteater, flying phalangers, wombat, and marsupial mouse, respectively. So, placental wolf and Tasmanian wolf, for instance, are closely related forms found in similar habitats but in different continents. Placental wolf is found in Asia, while the Tasmanian wolf is found in Australia. These animals have common ancestry. They revealed independent development of similar structures in two animal groups of common ancestry at their respective place of habitation. Placental wolf and the Tasmanian wolf therefore reveal parallel evolution. So, in the evolutionary view, the modern species occur at sites where they evolved from the ancestors which inhabited those regions. It is not that species were individually placed in suitable environment by the creator. So, this is all about here the biogeographical evidences. Now, the third evidence is physiological or biochemical evidences. So, comparative biochemistry also shows relationship among the animals. The aspects of biochemistry that indicate biochemical affinity are metabolic process, then the enzymes, then hormones, then blood and lymph, then blood proteins, blood groups, and molecular homology. So, the first one, that is the metabolic process. The metabolic process such as digestion, biosynthesis, respiration, muscle contraction, and the transmission of nerve impulses occur almost in a similar manner in all the animals. According to enzymes, the enzymes are essentially alike in their nature and action in most animals. Then hormones, the hormones resemble in their chemical nature and function in all the vertebrates. The similarity is so close that the deficiency of insulin hormone in man can be made up by the giving him the pancreas of the other animals. Next is blood and lymph. The blood and lymph fluids are similar to their composition and physiological role in all vertebrates. Blood proteins. The blood proteins of various mammals are similar to a large extent but are sharply distinguishable from those of other vertebrates. The blood protein tests have shown that the man is nearest to the great ape and the next nearer here in order are the old world monkeys. The new world monkeys are the tarsiers. Next is blood group. Four blood groups A, B, AB and O occurs in humans. The blood groups A and B are found in apes but not in monkeys. This suggests that the human beings are more closely related to the apes than to the monkey, though all the three have a common ancestry. The same is shown by the blood protein test mentioned earlier. Last is molecular homology. Similarity among the animals at a molecular level in all molecular homology, and here the phylogenetic relationships among animals are indicated by degrees of similarity in the base sequence in their nucleic acids and amino acid sequences in their protein. Human DNA differs in only 1.8% of its base pair from the chimpanzee DNA, and there is no differences between the two in the nucleic acid sequences for the protein cytochrome C. So, the close relationship indicated by these sequences conforms to that shown by other means such as anatomical or fossil evidences. So, these are all about the physiological and biochemical evidences. And now, the last one, that is the current evolution. So, it is interesting to note that evolution is occurring in nature even now. Rather, it is taking place more rapidly than in many of the past ages. Some remarkable instances of the evolutionary changes noted within historic time are mentioned here, in which the first one is rabbits. Some rabbits were introduced into Porto Santo, a small island in the Atlantic Ocean, in the early 15th century. The island had no rabbits before this. The rabbits multiplied very rapidly as there were no carnivorous enemies. In 400 years, they became quite different from the ancestral European stock. They were only half as large, developed a different color pattern, and become more nocturnal. More important, they failed to breed with the ancestral stock. They were in fact a new species of rabbit. Next is peppered moth. Within the last century, in the industrial regions of England, a light-colored moth, that is Biston betullaria, has given rise to a dark melanin species, that is Biston carbonaria, by change of color through mutation. It has been discussed ahead in this video series. And the last is viruses and bacteria. A striking evidence for the evolution is the rapid change of the certain viruses, bacteria, and the insects with the recent years. These forms evolved within the short period strains resistant to antibiotics and insecticides. So, this is the end of lecture in which you understood about the four left evidences of evolution, which are paleontological, biogeographical, physiological or biochemical, and the current evolution. The next video in evolution series will be on the theories of evolution. So if you understand this video, please like and share it and subscribe to my channel Anupma Biology Classes. If you have any question, any queries or any suggestions, you can ask in the comment section below. Thank you for the watching.